Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about whether you should found a city in a barren or bountiful landscape. So this might sound like a little bit of an arbitrary question, maybe a little bit ridiculous to you, but it's a question that historians, political scientists, philosophers have been asking for centuries, and the answers to it have implications that we should think about in terms of the incentives that surround different kinds of regimes and the way that they tend to evolve. So, what do I mean by this? Well, imagine a hypothetical scenario where you're the founder of a new city. You're going to create a new city where one doesn't currently exist. Now, I know many of us are thinking that's a little ridiculous because much of the earth at this point is already owned space, has been closed in, has been mapped out, etc. But just bear with me here. Let's pretend that you're founding a new city. You have a group of people, you're, let's say, refugees. You've been exiled from a previous kingdom or empire. This would not be an uncommon experience for groups of humans throughout human history. And so your job right now is to go find a new plot of land, a new area on which to found your new city for your people. And the question is, should you choose a bountiful area that has plenty of natural resources, that's already going to be easy to cultivate, easy to find resources for building and arms and so forth, or should you go for a more barren landscape? Now, this might seem like a ridiculous question. Maybe you think that obviously you should go for the bountiful plot of land, but it's not entirely it's a little bit counterintuitive when you start to think about it. So let's just play this out a little bit. Let's say you go right away with the bountiful land. Well, what's going to happen? Well, immediately you're going to, you and your settlers are going to start cultivating that land. You're going to start refining that land, and you're going to start turning the wealth of natural resources that surround the city into basically a wealthy city. And this will be great for your people. This will be good. They can afford to do farm work. They can start to specialize into, a merchant class maybe of some type. You can get more traders. You can get more artisans. You can get more warriors. You don't have to have everybody constantly looking for food. And in addition to that, you'll be able to trade with your neighbors around you. And so the empire that you're building, the city that you're building, will quickly become quite wealthy. And overall, in a few generations, you'll go from being poor refugees, poor settlers, to sitting high on the mountain. But of course, what's going to happen inevitably is that's going to attract a lot of attention. You're going to get greedy neighbors who want to take what you have, who are envious of what you have, maybe if you founded a really good city. You're also going to get barbarians and various kinds of outsiders who may want to plunder that city, who may want to try to hold it for ransom, things along these lines. And also, there could be a kind of moral decay, right? So whenever there's any kind of overabundance, you get naturally out of that you get indulgence, and so that means that it may be even harder to control the population of that city. It may be hard to keep your soldiers, for example, regimented because of the fact that they have so much natural abundance, and it's so easy to live life in that city. And Machiavelli actually brought this up in his Discourses on Livy when he was talking about the founding of Rome. He asked this very same question to his readers as part of the Mirror, which was, should you found a city in a place that's barren or a place that's bountiful? And his conclusion was similar along the lines that, of course, if you found a place that's bountiful, that has natural resources already, then you're going to run into this problem of indulgence. And naturally, the people that live there are going to become unregimented, undisciplined. They're going to become weak, and the empire will fall either due to its own internal corruptions or to some fiercer outsider. But of course, who wants to go live in somewhere that's barren? If you found a city in a barren place, well, then you're going to have to struggle to survive. And it's going to be very, very hard to bootstrap that city into being a success. It's going to be very hard to live. You're going to lose people to the weather, to famines, to various kinds of difficulties. And of course, you're not going to have to defend it as much because, hey, it's a piece of land that nobody wants. So you're not going to have to worry too much, I guess, about the invaders, except they may try to take what little that you do have, or try to maybe steal some people from you. But overall, you're not going to have a big target on your back because you're living in a place that no one cares about. And Machiavelli's answer to this was actually no, that this is a trick question. The answer is not whether it should be bountiful or whether it should be barren. The real answer is that you should try to found a city. The optimal way to found a city is to found it in a place that is both bountiful while also maintaining a set of laws that keep the harshness and rigidity of what a normally unbountiful or unforgiving natural environment might give you. So he said, and I'm quoting Machiavelli here, care must be had that hardships which the site does not enforce must be enforced by the laws. And what does this mean? Well, it means that if you don't want that bountiful city to become an indulgent, decadent society and to degrade itself, then the way you can do that with culture is by implementing laws which force a kind of harshness on the population. So imagine if Sparta, which was founded in sort of like, farmland, but rather not rich in natural resources compared to, the coastal cities like Athens and so forth. Imagine if Sparta had been very, very bountiful, and that they had imposed that regime not as a necessity to survive the environment, but actually as a way, as a strategy for not losing the advantages that come with having a harsh society. Because, of course, Sparta was set up the way that it was so harsh in its military virtue, and it demanded so much of its citizens because of the fact that it didn't have rich natural resources. And so Machiavelli's middle way here, which is ironic because he didn't believe in a middle way, is to say, look, what you should do actually is optimally, you should try to aim for the plot of land that has the most bountiful resources to it, that will give you the most natural advantages, and then institute a law, a set of cultural norms and practices, which then force the regimentation of that society as if they were living in a harsher climate where such a thing would be an absolute necessity for pure survival. And using that strategy, he thinks you can get the best of both worlds. And I think this is really interesting for thinking about modern political economies, because one of the things that this analysis of Machiavelli brings up is a solution to the paradox of plenty. The paradox of plenty is known in economics, and it basically says something similar, which is that an abundance of natural resources tends to lead to less optimal economic and social political outcomes. There's less democracy, there's less rights, there's less trade, and less flourishing of economic activity in general, ironically, in places that are naturally well endowed, so to speak. So you see this, of course, in the Middle East for a long time. You've got the places in the Middle East that are rich with oil, and you also see it in places like the Congo, which has a high level of natural resources, ground minerals, and so forth. And of course, in these societies, because of the incentives that exist around their wealth of natural resources, they tend to not have to develop very much. They tend to not have to diversify their economic sources. And so you get these sort of corrupt societies where they're just sort of pulling the money out of the ground, and they tend to devolve into very unpleasant places to be. And there's not a whole lot of economic diversification, because why do you need to diversify when the easiest thing to do, the most profitable thing to do, is to just start extracting? And so these places tend to develop a kind of extractionary ethic, not only in their economic practices, but also in their social practices, because, of course, human capital isn't that valuable in a place where the most precious resource is natural capital, can be pulled out of the ground or pulled out of the sea. And so you also have a degradation of the development of human capital, whereas in places like, I don't know, Northern Europe, for example, outside of recent discoveries in oil, historically speaking, they didn't have very, very many rich natural resources. These were harsh environments, cold environments, long winters, not very hospitable to lots of forms of life. And so, unlike in the more temperate zones with more hospitable environments, with more abundant natural resources, you have to develop human capital a lot more. It's a lot more important how much value the people that you have can bring to the regime than it is the natural resources that are sitting around. Because what have you got in Scandinavia? You know, you've got fish. And, you know, as I said, recently they've developed an oil-based economy, but even that started to run out and they realized they had to switch off of that. So this is a question that we should think about going forward. And I think it's important for the United States to consider its own situation in this respect, because we are also a land that has been gifted with a large amount of natural resources. And in a sense, we have also become indulgent due to that. But one of the things that's to our credit that we haven't done is we haven't neglected the development of human capital. And, at least thus far, we haven't had to institute severe laws or severe martial penalties upon the citizens in order to keep that culture going. Now, of course, I would say, and many others would say as well, that we are becoming a little bit of a decadent society. And so maybe our indulgence will, in fact, be our undoing. But for right now, it's a question that's open-ended. You know, obviously, no one in the 21st century in general is going to found a new city where there was not one before. In general, most of the cities that exist and that are going to exist in the future are cities that have already been established, except for maybe in some places in China, where they just sort of pop a city out of the ground out of nowhere. But that's what I want to leave you with today. How should we think about the incentives that are created around natural resource wealth and what that does in terms of warping the civic and cultural and political life of the humans that live in a given polity? So imagine you're founding a city. Do you want it to be in a barren place or an abundant place? Till next time.